Hello friends, on 22nd June 2023, a deep-sea submersible carrying 5 people on a voyage to the century-old wreck of the Titanic was found in pieces. The people on board on that submersible were unfortunately all killed. But how it happens? Let's go 4 days ago in time and find out what actually happened with the submersible and with the 5 people aboard on it. So on 18th of June 2023, at 9:30 a.m., a submarine Titan was sent to the depth of the sea to check out the wreck of the historical ship Titanic that has sunk 100 years ago in the depth of sea. Basically, it is an extreme type of adventures and is very expensive. Each and every person in this submarine has given over $2 lakh for this trip. This trip is so expensive because the Titanic's wreck is hidden 3,110 meters below the surface of the water. This submarine started its journey and was taking about 2 hours to reach the depth of 3,110 meters. There were 5 people in this submarine. After every 15 minutes, this submarine sends a signal to the support ship on the surface of the sea, whose name was Polar Prince. For them, this was the only communication channel with the world. On that day, 18th June, it had been only 1 hour and 45 minutes of this submarine's dive into the sea that suddenly it loses contact with the Polar Prince, and after that, it disappears forever. Now the main question here is that, what happened to this ship? Before going further, I would like to tell you that watching such type of educational videos is a perfect investment of time, so please watch till end. Okay, so now let's come back to the main story. The Titan, operated by the US-based company Oceangate Expeditions, had been missing since it lost contact with its surface support ship on Sunday morning about an hour, 45 minutes into what should have been a 2-hour dive to the world's most famous shipwreck. At 4:30 p.m., by the time when the submarine should have come back up after its tour, there is no sign of it. At 7:10 p.m., the team in Polar Prince decided to inform the U.S. Coast Guard. And from here, a 4-day-long multinational search began. Large-scale search and rescue operation is carried out to find this submarine. Aircraft, ships, and robot vehicles were also used. Everyone had only one question in their mind. What happened to these passengers? The place where this submarine disappeared is in the Atlantic Ocean near Canada. Look at the map. 600 kilometers away from Newfoundland, a Canadian island. At this place, in the depths of the water, you will find the wreck of the Titanic, broken into 2 parts. The bow and the stern both lie about 800 meters away from each other. The Titan submarine that disappeared here was not a submarine, but a submersible. These 2 words are very similar to each other. So, till now, I was using the word submarine to simplify things, but there is a very important difference between these 2 words. Submarines have their own power. They can use a port to go into the sea and come out of the sea independently. But submersibles cannot do that. To launch a submersible into the water and for it to come back, a support ship is needed. A ship that is present on the surface of the water and is controlling everything. In our case, this support ship was the Polar Prince. This entire operation was run by a company called Oceangate, whose CEO was Stockton Rush. Remember their name because he plays an important role in the story. By profession, he had been an aerospace engineer, and in 2009, he founded the Oceangate Company, a private company whose purpose was to take rich people on deep-sea expeditions as tourism. This company started offering Titanic tours in July 2021. Before this, they offered tours of other shipwrecks and areas. Titan was not the only submersible of this company. Apart from this, Oceangate had 2 other submersibles, Antipodes and Cyclops. Antipodes could go up to a depth of 304 meters and Cyclops up to 500 meters. But Titan was designed to go down 4,000 meters, meaning 4 kilometers underwater. This is why this was the only submersible to go to the Titanic. to visualize the frightening depth of 3,800 meters. Look at this chart created by the Washington Post. Measurements are in feet here. Normally, a man's height is 6 feet. The iceberg that collided with the Titanic was 100 feet above the surface of the water and several times that underwater. 130 feet is the maximum depth that recreational scuba divers can go to while scuba diving. After 650 feet, a twilight zone area starts where only a small amount of light can penetrate the depths of the water. 1,600 feet was the depth of the deepest ever underwater rescue operation conducted to date. 2,600 feet is the depth where giant squids swim. Giant squids are so scary that they look like they have come from an alien planet. Look at the photos. If you go further down, a midnight zone starts after 3,800 feet. No sunlight reaches below this mark. Everything turns black after this. The water temperature here is around 4 degrees. Now, if you go further down from here, 5,000 feet, 6,000 feet, 8,000 feet, 10,000 feet, and then you finally reach 12,500 feet, here is the ocean floor, where the Titanic wreck is lying. The pressure at this depth is almost 400 times the pressure on the surface. So, whichever submersible goes to this depth, its design should be thoroughly thought out. The glass for looking outside, the size of the window could be only this big. And the window in the Titan Submersible, which is called a viewport, was the biggest viewport that had been installed in any private submersible to date. The Titan Submersible was not that big. It had the capacity to seat only 5 people. Its main body, which is called the hull, was made of carbon fiber. 2 caps were attached at the end, which were made of titanium. And the total length of it was approximately 6.7 meters, and it weighed more than 10 to the 400 kilos. In its design, as you can see, there were 4 electric thrusters outside, 2 horizontal and 2 vertical, through which it could be operated. Now, an interesting fact to be noted here. This sub was controlled by a video game controller. You run the whole thing with this game controller. Come on! This is not as weird as it sounds, because the US Navy also controls their submarines and the periscopes, the viewports to see outside. They control them with Xbox controllers. But yes, the entire submarine, Titan, was being controlled with a video game controller. This means that the pilot who was operating the submersible in the water was also using this video game controller. If you look at the inside, there were no seats to sit inside it, but a small toilet was provided, which was beside the viewport. But there was no barrier to the toilet, so they literally said that if someone had to use the toilet, others would need to face the other way, to keep looking at a TV screen while the toilet was being used. This is the only toilet available on the deep diving submersible that's in-house. You can look out the viewport, pull the privacy screen in, and turn up the music. Because these submersibles go so deep into the water, the GPS doesn't work here. The communication to their support ship was carried on through a text messaging system. It is still unclear which internet connection was available on the ship. In this tweet from a few backs, Oceangate had said that they were using Starlink's satellite internet service to communicate. If we come back to this story of 18th of June, then 5 people were on board this submersible that day. The first was 58-year-old British billionaire Hamish Harding. He was an adventurer and a 3-time Guinness World Record holder. In 2016, he went to the South Pole with astronaut Buzz Aldrin. At one time, he did a 4-hour dive into the deepest part of the ocean, Mariana Trench. The second passenger was Paul-Henri Nargeolet, 77 years old, a former commander of the French Navy. He had visited the Titanic wreck 37 times. He was the director of underwater research for the RMS Titanic. The third and fourth passengers were a British-Pakistani businessman, Shahzada Dawood, and his 19-year-old son, Suleiman. He was the owner of one of the biggest companies in Pakistan. Suleiman's aunt had said that Suleiman was actually scared of going, but he went with his father to please him and to give him company on this journey. As I told you, that day, the submersible was communicating with the support ship at every 15-minute interval. This communication stopped at 11:15 a.m. After this, no communication and no signal is received. Despite this, it was expected that the Titan would resurface at 4:30 p.m. as scheduled. Because if by chance this submersible would get stuck in the water, there was a way for the passengers to tilt it from inside and push it back and forth to bring it back up. This is done by removing the ballasts. Ballasts are an important part of big ships and submarines to provide stability. They are nothing more than heavyweights. With their help, submarines can descend into the water. In the olden days, stones and sandbags were used as ballasts. But today, submarines use water ballasts. Ballast tanks are filled with water so that the weight increases and the submarines sink into the water. At 4:30 p.m., when the Titan did not resurface, people in the support ship waited for a while and then notified the U.S. Coast Guard at 7:10 p.m. After this began the Great Race. The race against time. 96 hours, only 4 days of oxygen supply was available in Titan. So if a rescue operation had to be conducted, they only had 4 days to find the passengers alive. Often, an emergency locator is installed on ships, which is called Emergency Position Indicating Radio Beacon, EPIRB. With the help of this, these vessels can be located, but it was not installed in Titan. Here, another problem was that even if Titan would have come back to the surface of the sea, people sitting inside it would have died due to the lack of oxygen, because there was no way to open this submersible from the inside. You heard it right. The door of this submersible could only be locked from the outside and opened from the outside. So whether the submersible was inside the water or on the surface, those 4 days were very critical. The crew closes the hatch from the outside with 17 bolts. There's no other way out. On top of it, the search area was 25,000 kilometers. Imagine how difficult it is to find a van-sized submersible in such a huge area. The area was 7 times bigger than the state of Goa, and the deepest underwater rescue that has been done so far was only done at a depth of 480 meters underwater in 1973. But still, the rescue teams put their lives at stake. Initially, 2 American and 2 Canadian aircraft started this operation. Sonar was deployed by them so that they could detect signals even from underwater. 3 ships started the search from the surface, but as time passed, more ships started coming in for the search operation. Some remotely operated vehicles, i.e. ROVs, were also used here. Think of them as basically robot-type vehicles. No one sits inside it, but they can dive into the water and find things, and they are controlled from the surface of the water. 3 ROVs were searching for Titan. After 3 days of searching, on the 3rd day of the search operation, a sonar from a Canadian aircraft heard some banging noises. In half-hour intervals, some sounds were heard, like someone knocking on the door. Later, the U.S. Coast Guard also heard the sounds. Finally, on 22nd June, an ROV searching on the ocean floor encountered some debris, around 490 meters away from the Titanic's bow. It was confirmed upon seeing the debris that the submersible had broken apart. The people who sitting inside it had lost their lives. After searching some more, 5 pieces of debris were found in total. On the same day, the U.S. Coast Guard confirmed in a press conference that the banging noises they heard had nothing to do with this Titan submersible. Actually, the conclusion that was derived was that Titan imploded due to high pressure. You might be thinking that implosion means bursting, but it is actually the opposite of an explosion. We use the word explosion when there is an outbreak or eruption like a bomb explosion. The force moves outwards. but the force of an implosion moves inwards, breaking apart due to being squeezed in. That is implosion. And catastrophic implosion means that the implosion happened so fast that the entire structure was destroyed, but it didn't even take a millisecond. This means that the people sitting in it were killed immediately in the blink of an eye, but they didn't feel it. The question here is, what was the reason behind this implosion? Actually, the main body of the Titan, as I said, it was made of carbon fiber. But usually, submarines and submersibles are made of steel, titanium, or aluminum. This carbon fiber design of Titan was an experimental design. No one had ever tested the properties of carbon fiber in such depths of the ocean before. And looking at this disaster, we can say that carbon fiber is not a suitable material for this use case, as said by an ocean explorer, Robert Ballard, the man who discovered the wreck of the Titanic in 1985. He said that they have done thousands of dives in different vehicles to get to the bottom of the ocean, but they have never lost a vehicle. This was the first time that a submarine or a submersible imploded in this way. Stockton Rush knew that he was conducting an experiment that could be very dangerous. In January 2018, Oceangate's Director of Marine Operations, David Lockridge, had actually mentioned safety concerns about Titan Submersible. And when Oceangate did not pay any heed to the warnings, he went to court with it. In the court, he stated that there should be a safety assessment and certification of this submersible. But Oceangate refused. He said that this company was not interested in spending money on safety. So that was all in this story. What do you think who is responsible for this disasters? Let me know your humble opinion in the comments. I will meet you in next video with an interesting topic. Till that, stay happy and also subscribe and like.